A woman vanishes after testifying in court. The only witness? Her sign language interpreter. The only clue? An 8-year-old deaf boy who won't speak to anyone, except the one person who reminds him of his missing aunt. What the interpreter doesn't know is that uncovering the truth will cost her everything she's spent years protecting herself from, including the ability to trust again. Alina Ward's hands moved through the air with practiced precision, translating testimony that could destroy lives or save them. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray October afternoon in Chicago where the courthouse lights felt too bright and the hallways too quiet. Alina had interpreted hundreds of sessions just like this one. She'd learned to stay detached, to be invisible, a conduit for other people's words, never her own. But when Claire Monroe's trembling hands spelled out those words, "They're watching me," something shifted. Claire was 34, a former lab technician at Meridian Biotech, one of Chicago's most prestigious pharmaceutical companies. She'd come to testify in a preliminary hearing about workplace safety violations. Minor stuff, Alina thought. OSHA complaints. Nothing that should make a woman's hands shake like that. After the session ended, Claire grabbed Alina's wrist in the empty hallway. Her grip was desperate, her nails digging crescents into Alina's skin. "If something happens to me," Claire signed, her movements sharp and frantic, "promise me you'll check on Noah, my nephew. He's 8, he's deaf. He needs someone who can actually hear him." Before Alina could respond, a bailiff called them back inside. Claire released her grip and walked away, shoulders squared, preparing to face the people who terrified her. That was the last time anyone saw Claire Monroe alive. 3 days later, Alina's phone rang at 3:47 in the morning. She'd been dreaming about the accident again, the one from 6 years ago that took her hearing in her left ear and nearly took her life. In the dream, she could still hear perfectly. She could hear her sister screaming her name. She could hear the impact. She always woke up before the second sound. Silence. The phone's vibration pulled her from sleep. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again and again. Detective Marcus Hale's voice was rough with exhaustion when she finally answered. He was 42, though he looked 50. 2 decades on the force had carved lines into his face that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with seeing too much and saving too little. "Miss Ward, I need to ask you about Claire Monroe," he said. Alina sat up, suddenly alert. "Is she all right?" "That's what we're trying to determine." Claire hadn't shown up to work Wednesday morning. Her car was still in her driveway, keys on the kitchen counter, purse on the dining table. Her cell phone was off. No one had heard from her in 72 hours. Alina's mind replayed Claire's final words, "If something happens to me." She dismissed it then as paranoia. Now, sitting in her dark apartment with her pulse hammering in the one ear that still worked properly, she realized she'd made a mistake. Alina agreed to meet Detective Hale at the precinct at 9 that morning. After hanging up, she sat in the darkness of her studio apartment, everything neat, controlled, sterile. No photographs on the walls, no plants, no mess. She'd built this life carefully after the accident. Small, quiet, safe. Looking at something Claire had made her write down became a promise she didn't want to keep. Noah's name, scribbled on a sticky note she'd forgotten about until now. The 14th District Police Station smelled like burned coffee and old regret. Alina arrived 15 minutes early, her professional mask firmly in place, navy blazer, hair pulled back, expression neutral. She'd learned to read rooms quickly in her work. This room screamed bureaucratic indifference. Missing person reports papered the walls. Most would never be solved. Detective Hale looked worse in person than he'd sounded on the phone. Rumpled shirt, coffee stain on his tie, eyes that had stopped expecting good news years ago. "Miss Ward, thanks for coming in." He led her to an interview room. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the kind of space designed to make people uncomfortable enough to tell the truth. Hale sat across from her with a thin file folder. Claire Monroe's entire disappearance, reduced to a dozen sheets of paper. "Walk me through Tuesday," he said. "Every detail." Alina recounted it professionally. The testimony, Claire's nervousness, the way she'd gripped Alina's wrist afterward. Did she say anything that indicated she was planning to leave? Hale asked. No, the opposite. She was scared of something, someone. Who? Alina hesitated. This was the line she'd sworn never to cross, confidentiality, the sacred trust between interpreter and client. But Claire was missing. She signed that they were watching her. She wouldn't specify who. She mentioned needing witness protection but didn't elaborate. And she made me promise to check on her nephew if, Alina stopped, if something happened to her. Hale wrote something in his notebook. His handwriting was terrible. This nephew, Noah, what do you know about him? Only what she told me. He's 8, he's deaf. I assume she's his guardian. Was. The word hung in the air like smoke. We found Noah yesterday, Hale continued. He'd been staying with Claire since his parents died in a fire 2 years ago. When she didn't come home Wednesday night, the kid waited. When she didn't come home Thursday, he was still waiting. A neighbor finally noticed the lights had been on for 3 days straight and called it in. Alina felt something crack in her chest, the professional distance she'd maintained for years. Where is he now? Emergency foster placement. Problem is, the kid won't communicate, won't eat, won't sleep, just sits in the corner and stares at the door like he's waiting for his aunt to walk through it. Hale closed the folder and looked at Alina directly for the first time. The social worker says none of them know sign language. They've tried writing things down, but the kid won't respond. They're about to transfer him to a facility for traumatized children who can't communicate. That's insane, Alina said, her voice sharper than she intended. He can communicate perfectly. He just needs someone who speaks his language. That's why I called you, Hale said quietly. I need to know what this kid saw, and you're the only person who can ask him. The foster home was in Pilsen, a neighborhood gentrifying so fast you could practically see the property values rising in real time. The house itself was clean but overcrowded, toys scattered across the living room, children's voices echoing from upstairs. Alina followed Hale and a tired-looking social worker named Rita through the chaos to a bedroom at the back of the house. He's been in there since yesterday, Rita said, unlocking the door. Won't let anyone near him. Tried to bite one of the other kids when they came too close. Alina felt her stomach tighten. Through the crack in the door, she could see a small figure hunched in the corner, dark hair, thin shoulders, knees pulled to his chest. She'd learned sign language for her younger sister, Mia. Mia had been born deaf, and Alina had thrown herself into ASL with the kind of desperate intensity only a protective older sister could muster. They'd been inseparable until the accident. The drunk driver had hit them head-on. Mia died instantly. Alina survived but lost hearing in her left ear, punishment she'd always thought for being the one behind the wheel. She hadn't signed with anyone except professionally in 6 years. Hadn't let herself get close to anyone who might make her remember what it felt like to communicate in the language of her sister's silence. But looking at Noah now, curled in that corner like a wounded animal, she remembered why she'd learned it in the first place. Alina knelt down slowly, staying several feet back. She waited until the boy's eyes flicked toward her, dark, suspicious, ready to flee or fight. Then she raised her hands and signed. Hello, Noah. My name is Alina. I knew your Aunt Claire. The effect was instantaneous. Noah's entire body went rigid. His eyes locked onto her hands like they were a lifeline. No, Aunt Claire. His signing was hesitant, rusty from days of no one understanding him. Yes, she asked me to check on you, to make sure you're okay. Noah's face crumpled. Tears he'd been holding back for 3 days finally broke through. Where is she? Everyone keeps moving their mouths at me, but I don't know what they're saying, and she always comes back, and she promised she'd come back. His hands moved so fast Alina almost couldn't follow. Pain and fear and desperation all tangled together. I don't know where she is, Alina signed honestly. But people are looking for her. Detective Hale, she gestured to Hale standing in the doorway, is trying to find her. But he needs your help. Noah shook his head violently. I don't want to help. I want Aunt Claire. I know, but maybe if you tell us what you remember, we can find her faster. Behind her, Alina could feel Hale watching, waiting. She knew what he wanted, information, leads, answers, but Noah wasn't a witness to be interrogated. He was a terrified child who'd lost everyone he loved. Alina made a decision that would change everything. Noah, I'm going to stay with you tonight, right here, and we're going to figure this out together, okay? The boy studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Hale wasn't happy about Alina's decision, but he didn't stop her. Rita arranged for a cot to be brought into Noah's room. As night fell, Alina sat cross-legged on the floor while Noah remained in his corner, watching her with careful eyes. She didn't push, didn't ask questions, just signed simple things. Are you hungry? Do you want water? It's okay to be scared. Gradually, as the house settled into sleep around them, Noah began to inch closer. By midnight, he was sitting next to her, their shoulders almost touching. Aunt Claire was scared, he signed finally. The last week, she kept checking the windows. She made me promise not to answer the door. Did she tell you why? Noah shook his head, then his hands moved again, slower now. But I saw something, the night before she didn't come home. Alina's pulse quickened. What did you see? A van, black. It was parked across the street for 3 hours. The man inside was watching our house. When I told Aunt Claire, she got really scared. She made me go to my room and lock the door. What did the man look like? Noah's face scrunched up, trying to remember. I don't know, it was dark, but he paused, his small hands forming shapes carefully. The van had a logo on the side, blue and white, a picture of a bird. No, wings, just wings. Alina felt ice slide down her spine. She knew that logo. Meridian Biotech. The next morning, Alina met Hale at a diner 3 blocks from the precinct. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities she didn't want to believe. Over burnt coffee and rubbery eggs, she told him everything Noah had said. Hale listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. Meridian Biotech, he said finally. That's Claire's employer, the company she was testifying against. For OSHA violations. Officially, Hale pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. But I did some digging last night. Claire wasn't just a lab tech. For the past 8 months, she'd been working in their clinical trials division. Clinical trials for what? That's the question I can't get answered. Meridian's lawyers shut down every request for information. They're citing proprietary research, patient privacy, the whole 9 yards. Alina pushed her eggs around her plate, thinking. Noah said the van was watching their house the night before Claire disappeared. That's not random surveillance. That's targeted. I know. So what was Claire going to testify about that made them watch her house? Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if it wasn't OSHA violations? What if that was just the opening, the legal foothold to get her testimony on record? What if she knew something bigger? They spent the rest of the morning reconstructing Claire's last weeks. Hale pulled phone records, credit card statements, anything that might show a pattern. Alina, meanwhile, did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She called the court reporter who'd transcribed Claire's testimony and asked for an unofficial copy. It arrived by email that afternoon. Alina read it 3 times, looking for anything that seemed off. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Complaints about improper ventilation, missing safety equipment, inadequate training protocols. Standard corporate negligence. But there was one exchange, buried on page 47, that made Alina stop. The attorney asked, "And during your time in the clinical trials division, did you observe any violations of informed consent protocols?" Claire answered, "Yes." "Can you elaborate?" "I'd prefer to discuss those details in closed session." "Mrs. Monroe, this is a preliminary hearing. You need to." "Please, not here, not with, pause, not publicly." The attorney had moved on to other questions, but that exchange stuck with Alina like a splinter under skin. Informed consent protocols, clinical trials. What had Claire seen? That night, Alina did something reckless. She went to Claire's apartment. Hale had given her the address during their diner conversation, mentioned in passing that the scene had been cleared, no signs of forced entry or struggle. The implication was clear. Claire had left voluntarily. Or she'd been taken by someone she trusted enough to open the door for. Alina didn't have a key, but the building's security was laughable, a broken intercom and a back door that didn't quite latch. She was inside within minutes, her heart hammering so loud she could barely hear anything through her good ear. Claire's apartment was frozen in time. Mail stacked on the counter, coffee mug in the sink, a child's drawings taped to the refrigerator, Noah's artwork, bright and cheerful, heartbreaking in their normalcy. Alina moved through the space carefully, looking for what? She didn't even know. Then she found it. Taped to the underside of Noah's desk drawer, a flash drive, small and black and deliberately hidden. Alina pulled it free with trembling hands, stared at it for a long moment. This was evidence. This was something Hale should see first, through proper channels. But something in Claire's terrified hands, they're watching, made Alina pocket the drive instead. She'd look at it first, just to see. Alina's laptop whirred as the flash drive loaded. She sat in her dark apartment, curtains drawn, door locked, feeling paranoid and justified in equal measure. The drive contained hundreds of files, medical records, lab results, video files, all encrypted. Alina wasn't a hacker, but she'd learned basic digital security after the accident. Too many journalists had tried to get her story, and she'd needed to protect her privacy. She knew how to run password-cracking software. It would take hours, maybe days, but the encryption broke on the third attempt. Password, Noah 2016. The year he was born, the thing Claire loved most. What Alina found made her stomach turn. The files documented a clinical trial that had been running for 18 months. Code name, Project Meridian. Objective, development of next-generation cochlear implant technology with integrated neural monitoring capabilities. On the surface, it sounded revolutionary. Implants that could not only restore hearing, but adapt in real time to neural patterns, providing unprecedented clarity. But as Alina clicked through the files, a darker picture emerged. The trial participants were all deaf or hard of hearing. Most were low income. Many were undocumented immigrants. All had signed consent forms, but those forms failed to mention a crucial detail. The implants weren't just monitoring neural patterns. They were recording them, storing them, uploading them to Meridian's central servers. Essentially, the company was building a database of deaf individuals' brain activity without their knowledge or consent. But it got worse. Alina opened a video file labeled Subject 017 Adverse Event. The footage showed a woman, maybe mid-30s, sitting in a clinical examination room. She looked disoriented, hands moving sluggishly through signs Alina didn't recognize, not ASL, something more fragmented. A doctor's voice off camera. Subject 17 experiencing severe auditory hallucinations following implant activation. Neural mapping shows abnormal activity in the temporal lobe. Recommend immediate removal. The woman's hands moved faster now, desperate. The signs were clear enough. Help me, please make it stop. The doctor's response. We'll need to complete the full data collection first. Protocol requires minimum 72 hours of monitoring. The video ended. Alina sat in darkness, hands shaking, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't medical research. This was exploitation. Experimentation on vulnerable populations who couldn't advocate for themselves. And Claire had discovered it. Alina called Hale immediately. It was 2 a.m., but he answered on the first ring, the voice of a man who'd stopped expecting sleep years ago. I found something, Alina said. Claire's apartment, flash drive, you need to see this. She sent him the files while they were still on the phone, listened to his silence as he clicked through them. Finally, Jesus Christ. This is what she was going to testify about, Alina said. The informed consent violations. She was building a case against Meridian from the inside. And they killed her for it. The words hung between them, unspoken until now, but both had been thinking it from the start. We don't know that, Alina said, but the protest was weak. Then where is she? Hale's voice was hard. 72 hours, no contact, no activity on her credit cards or phone. People don't just vanish, Miss Ward. Someone makes them vanish. Alina thought of Noah, waiting in that foster home for an aunt who would never come back. What do we do? We build a case, Hale said, but we do it carefully. If Meridian is willing to kill to protect this, they won't hesitate to cover their tracks. We need more than one flash drive. We need witnesses. We need... His voice cut off abruptly. Hale. Silence. Detective Hale. Then quietly, someone's watching your building. Alina's blood turned to ice. What? Black van, across the street from your address. I'm looking at traffic camera footage right now. It's been there for 20 minutes. Alina moved to her window, careful not to disturb the curtains, peered through a gap. There it was, black van, blue and white logo on the side. Meridian Biotech. They knew she had the files. Get out, Hale said urgently. Right now, back door, stay in shadows, head toward the L station. I'll meet you there. Alina grabbed her laptop, the flash drive, her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold anything. She was halfway to the door when she remembered. Noah's drawing, still taped to her refrigerator. The one he'd made that afternoon while they waited for Rita to bring dinner, a picture of 3 people holding hands. Him, Claire, and someone new. Someone who looked like Alina. She grabbed it, shoved it in her pocket, and ran. The Chicago night was October cold and rain slick as Alina burst from her building's back exit. She could hear footsteps behind her, heavy, professional, closing fast. She ran. Through alleys that smelled like garbage and regret, past homeless encampments and locked businesses. Her lungs burned, her left ear completely useless for tracking sounds behind her, forcing her to keep looking back, losing precious seconds. The L station was 3 blocks away. She could see its lights through the rain. 2 blocks. Footsteps getting closer. 1 block. A hand grabbed her shoulder. Alina spun, swinging her laptop bag like a weapon. It connected with something solid, a man's face. He staggered back, cursing. She didn't stop to see if he was alone. The L platform was nearly empty at this hour, just a few night shift workers and insomniacs. Alina vaulted the turnstile, ignoring the clerk's shout, and ran for the northbound platform. A train was just pulling in. She threw herself through the closing doors, heart hammering, gasping for breath. Through the window, she saw 2 men in dark suits hit the platform, saw them pull out phones, reporting to someone. The train pulled away. Alina collapsed into a seat, shaking so violently she couldn't hold her phone steady. She texted Hale, "Made it. Where are you?" His response came 30 seconds later. Fullerton Station, 15 minutes. Alina spent those 15 minutes watching every passenger who boarded, paranoid that any of them might be working for Meridian. An elderly woman with grocery bags, a teenager with headphones, a businessman who didn't look up from his phone. Any of them could be watching her. Hale was waiting at Fullerton, looking as rattled as Alina felt. He ushered her into his car, an unmarked sedan that smelled like old coffee and desperation, and pulled into traffic. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. Where is safe when a multi-billion-dollar corporation wants you dead? Good question. They drove in silence for several minutes before Alina said, "Noah." Hale glanced at her. "What about him?" "If they know I have the files, they know I've been talking to Noah. They know he's a witness." "The foster home is." "An address in public records. Hale, they've been watching my building. How long before they find him?" Hale's jaw tightened. Then he swore and jerked the wheel, making an illegal U-turn. "Where are we going?" "To get the kid." The foster home was dark when they arrived at 3:47 a.m., that cursed time when Alina had first gotten the call about Claire. Hale kept the engine running while Alina picked the side door lock with a hairpin and skills she'd learned from a locksmith ex-boyfriend years ago. Inside, the house was silent. She crept through rooms full of sleeping children to the back bedroom where Noah should have been. The door was open. The room was empty. Alina's heart stopped. Then she saw him, curled in the closet, hidden behind hanging coats, eyes wide and terrified in the darkness. "Noah," she signed, keeping her movements small and non-threatening. "It's me, Alina. We need to go right now." "Why?" His hands shook. "Where's Aunt Claire?" "I don't know, but I promise we're going to find her. But first I need to keep you safe. Will you trust me?" Noah studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded and took her offered hand. They were halfway to the front door when lights flooded the street outside. 3 vehicles, moving fast, surrounding Hale's sedan. "Shit," Hale's voice came through Alina's phone. "Police cruisers, but I didn't call for backup." "Then who did?" Alina pulled Noah back into the shadows, watching through a window as uniformed officers approached Hale's car. Something was wrong. The officers moved with military precision, nothing like standard police procedure. Then she saw the logo on one officer's jacket, briefly visible under a streetlight. Meridian Biotech Security, wearing police uniforms. "Hale, get out of there," Alina whispered into her phone. "Those aren't real cops." "What?" "Trust me, drive now." To his credit, Hale didn't hesitate. His sedan's engine roared to life, tires screaming as he punched through the gap between 2 vehicles and disappeared into the night, leaving Alina and Noah trapped inside. The fake officers moved toward the foster home. Alina pulled Noah deeper into the house, her mind racing through options. They couldn't go out the front or back. Both exits were covered. The windows had security bars. They were trapped. Then Noah tugged her sleeve. His hands moved quickly. "I know another way." He led her to the basement, where a small coal chute that hadn't been used in decades provided just enough space for a child and a slender adult to squeeze through. They emerged in the neighbor's yard, rain-soaked and filthy, just as the fake officers broke down the foster home's front door. Alina and Noah ran. Hale found them 3 hours later, huddled in an all-night laundromat in Pilsen. Noah was wrapped in Alina's jacket, shivering from cold and fear. Alina was cycling through news sites on her laptop, looking for any mention of a break-in at a foster home, any indication of what Meridian was telling the authorities. Nothing, as if it had never happened. "I've got a place," Hale said. "Friend of mine, retired cop, lives in a cabin 2 hours north. No paper trail, no electronic footprint. We can hide there while we figure out our next move." "What is our next move?" Alina asked. "We have evidence of illegal experimentation, but no way to present it without being killed. We have a missing woman who's probably dead and a child who's a material witness, but too young to testify in any legal proceeding. We're being hunted by a corporation with enough resources to impersonate police officers, and we don't know who in law enforcement we can trust." "So we go public," Hale said. "Bypass the system entirely, leak the files to journalists, create enough noise that Meridian can't silence everyone." Alina wanted to believe it would be that simple, but nothing about this had been simple from the start. The cabin was exactly what Hale had promised, isolated, off-grid, surrounded by woods that muffled sound and provided cover. They arrived as dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt obscene given everything that had happened. Noah fell asleep almost immediately, curled on the couch with exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Alina and Hale sat at the kitchen table, laptop between them, going through the flash drive files one more time. "There has to be something we're missing," Alina said. "Some detail that explains why Meridian took such a risk." "They experimented on deaf people without informed consent," Hale said. "That's enough." "No, there's more. Think about it, why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not just pay off the trial participants? Why not bury the data and move on? Why kill Claire? She clicked through files looking for something, anything that would make this make sense. Then she found it. A file labeled Next Phase Proposal. The document outlined Meridian's plans for the technology once it was perfected. The neural monitoring capabilities weren't just about improving hearing. They were about data collection on a massive scale. Imagine having access to the unfiltered neural patterns of millions of cochlear implant users worldwide. Their emotions, their decisions, their responses to stimuli. This data could revolutionize everything from marketing to law enforcement to national security. The deaf community would be unwitting test subjects for technology that could eventually be deployed on the hearing population. It wasn't about helping people hear. It was about learning how to read minds. And Claire had discovered it. Elena showed Hale the document, watched the color drain from his face. "This is bigger than medical malpractice," he said quietly. "This is, Christ, I don't even know what to call this. Corporate espionage, human rights violations, dystopian nightmare. All of the above." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of what they'd discovered settling over them like snow. Finally, Elena said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay." "Why are you doing this? You could have closed Claire's case as a voluntary missing person and moved on. You didn't have to involve yourself in corporate conspiracy. You didn't have to risk your career, your safety. Why did you?" Hale was quiet for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 8 years ago, I had a case. Missing girl, 16 years old, deaf. Family reported her missing, but nobody took it seriously because she had a history of running away. I did the bare minimum, filed the report, made some calls, moved on. His voice was hollow, scraped raw by memory. They found her body 3 weeks later. Traffickers had grabbed her off the street. She'd been signing for help, but nobody understood. Nobody bothered to learn. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "I've been carrying that for 8 years, Hale continued. "Every case involving someone deaf or disabled, I see her face. I wonder if things would have been different if I'd just tried harder, learned her language, made her matter." He looked at Elena directly for the first time. "So when you called about Claire, when you told me there was a deaf kid who couldn't communicate with anyone, I couldn't walk away again." They sat together in that cabin kitchen, two wounded people who'd found each other through tragedy and silence, and Elena realized something. She'd spent 6 years building walls to keep everyone out. 6 years punishing herself for surviving when Mia hadn't. 6 years believing she didn't deserve connection or purpose or redemption. But maybe that had been wrong. Maybe healing wasn't about protecting yourself from pain. Maybe it was about choosing to feel it anyway, for the right reasons, with the right people. She reached across the table and took Hale's hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, dawn had fully broken. Birds were singing. Noah was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. And somewhere in Chicago, Meridian Biotech was planning their next move. They spent 3 days at the cabin, planning. Hale reached out to 2 journalists he'd worked with before, investigative reporters for the Tribune who'd broken corruption stories before. Elena prepared detailed documentation of everything on the flash drive, organizing it into a narrative that even non-medical professionals could understand. Noah drew pictures of his aunt, pictures of the 3 of them in the cabin, pictures of what he hoped would happen when this was all over. On the 4th day, they received word. The journalists were ready to publish. The story broke at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning, time to hit both the print edition and online simultaneously. Exposé: Meridian Biotech's Secret Human Experimentation, ON Deaf Community. The headline was followed by 30 pages of documentation, witness testimony, leaked files, and medical records. Everything Claire had died trying to expose. The response was immediate and explosive. By noon, Meridian's stock had dropped 40%. The FBI announced an investigation. The FDA suspended all of Meridian's clinical trial authorizations. The CEO released a statement denying all allegations, but her voice shook during the press conference, and her eyes kept darting off camera like she was looking for an escape route. By evening, protesters surrounded Meridian's corporate headquarters, deaf advocacy groups, disability rights organizations, human rights lawyers. The crowd chanted and signed, their collective voice finally being heard. Alina watched it all from the cabin, laptop open, news streaming, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with terror. But Meridian wasn't going down without a fight. That night, a counteroffensive began. Press releases claiming the documents were fabricated. Statements from trial participants, paid actors, Hale suspected, saying they'd consented fully and been treated well. Character assassination attempts against Claire, painting her as unstable, vindictive, a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. And then the dangerous move. Meridian's legal team filed a motion claiming the flash drive had been obtained illegally, making all evidence inadmissible in any potential criminal trial. They were technically right. Alina had broken into Claire's apartment. The chain of custody was broken. A good defense attorney could get everything thrown out. "We knew this might happen," Hale said, reading the legal filing on his phone. "But the court of public opinion is different from a court of law. Even if charges get dropped, Meridian's reputation is destroyed." "That's not justice," Alina said. "Claire is still missing. The trial participants still suffered. Meridian's executives will walk away with golden parachutes while the people they hurt get nothing." She was right, and Hale knew it. The answer came from an unexpected source, Noah. The boy had been quiet all day, watching the news coverage with wide eyes, seeing his aunt's face on screen over and over. Missing woman, whistleblower, hero. That evening, as Alina was making dinner, Noah tugged her sleeve. "I want to tell them," he signed. "Tell who what, sweetheart?" "The people on TV. I want to tell them what I saw." Alina knelt down to his level, heart breaking. "Noah, you're 8 years old. They can't make you testify. You don't have to do this." "But Aunt Claire would want me to," he signed, tears streaming down his cheeks. "She always said we have to speak up when things are wrong, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary." "Your aunt was very brave." "So am I," Noah signed, drawing himself up to his full height, all 4 feet of stubborn determination. "I'm Claire Monroe's nephew, and I want to help." They arranged it carefully, with layers of security. Hale called in from every favor he'd ever earned. A live television interview on a major network. Prime time, millions of viewers. Noah would testify, not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, with Alina interpreting his signs and Hale sitting beside them as both protection and witness. The network set up in a neutral location, a community center in Lincoln Park, nowhere near Meridian's corporate reach. Security swept the building twice. Plainclothes officers were positioned at every entrance. They were taking no chances. The interview was conducted by Rachel Zhao, an investigative journalist known for handling vulnerable witnesses with sensitivity. She started gently, asking Noah about his aunt, what she was like, what they did together, how she made him feel safe. Noah's hands moved slowly at first, shy under the camera lights, but as he talked about Claire, his signs grew more confident. Alina translated every word, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Then Zhao asked the question they'd all been preparing for. "Noah, what did you see the night before your aunt disappeared?" Noah took a deep breath. His hands moved with careful precision. "A van, black. It was parked outside our house for 3 hours. The man inside was watching us. When I told Aunt Claire, she got scared. She made me lock my bedroom door and promise not to come out no matter what I heard." "Did you hear something?" Noah nodded. His next signs were slower, more hesitant. "After midnight, I heard knocking. Aunt Claire answered. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the vibrations through the floor, heavy footsteps, more than one person. Then Aunt Claire signed to me through the door." He paused, tears welling up. "She signed, 'I love you, be brave, Alina will come.'" Alina's voice cracked as she translated those words. Beside her, Hale's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. That was the last thing she said to me, Noah signed. Then the footsteps left, and she was gone. The interview footage went viral within an hour. A deaf child, signing his testimony with heartbreaking clarity, translated by an interpreter who'd risked everything to protect him, sitting beside a detective who'd learned to see people's society made invisible. It was powerful, it was damning, it was impossible to ignore. By morning, 3 Meridian executives had been arrested. The FBI had expanded their investigation. Trial participants who'd been too scared to speak out before began coming forward, emboldened by Noah's courage. And most importantly, the police received a tip. An anonymous caller reported sounds coming from an abandoned warehouse in Bridgeport, a property owned by a subsidiary of Meridian Biotech. When officers investigated, they found something that made even hardened cops weep. They found Claire. Claire Monroe had been held in that warehouse for 9 days, drugged, beaten, interrogated about who she'd told, what evidence she had, how much damage control Meridian needed to do. She'd told them nothing. When Alina and Noah were finally allowed to see her in the hospital, heavily guarded, still unconscious but alive, Noah signed something that broke Alina's heart and healed it simultaneously. I knew she'd come back. She always comes back. The legal proceedings took months. Meridian Biotech filed for bankruptcy, its assets seized to pay settlements to trial participants. The CEO and 3 executives faced criminal charges ranging from fraud to kidnapping to conspiracy to commit murder. The trial participants, including Subject 17 from the video, began the long process of healing, physically from the implant damage, emotionally from the trauma of being treated as test subjects instead of human beings. The deaf community came together, advocating for stricter informed consent laws, better representation in medical research, more oversight of clinical trials. Claire's testimony, given once she recovered enough to face her captors in court, was devastating. She described in precise detail how she discovered the neural monitoring capabilities, how she'd tried to report it through proper channels only to be threatened and silenced, how she'd finally decided to go public because she couldn't live with herself otherwise. They thought I'd stay quiet because I was deaf, Claire said through Alina's interpretation. They thought I couldn't make enough noise to matter. They were wrong. 6 months after that night in the diner, 6 months after Noah had signed for help and Alina had answered, they stood together in Lincoln Park on a warm April afternoon. Noah was feeding ducks again, his movements confident now, unafraid. He'd been placed officially with Claire, who'd regained full custody once she was released from the hospital. They'd moved to a new apartment, one with better security and windows that actually locked. Alina visited 3 times a week, teaching Noah things that had nothing to do with trauma or testimony or fear. Just teaching him to be a kid who happened to be deaf in a world that was slowly learning to listen. Hale stood beside her, no longer the burnt-out detective who'd stopped believing in justice. He'd been promoted, put in charge of a new unit focused on crimes against vulnerable populations. He carried a picture of the 16-year-old girl he'd failed to save, not as punishment anymore, but as a reminder of why the work mattered. You know, Hale said, watching Noah laugh at a particularly aggressive mallard, I never asked you why you learned sign language in the first place. Alina was quiet for a moment. Then, my sister, Mia, she was born deaf. I was 12 when she was born, and I threw myself into learning ASL like my life depended on it. She died in a car accident 6 years ago. I was driving. Drunk driver hit us head-on. She died instantly. I lost the hearing in my left ear. Hale's expression softened with understanding. I spent 6 years thinking it was punishment, Alina continued. That I survived but couldn't hear properly anymore because I didn't deserve to. That I should have protected her better, driven more carefully, seen it coming somehow. That's not how guilt works, Hale said gently. It's not logical, it just is. I know, but meeting Noah, helping Claire, It made me realize something. What's that? Elena watched Noah sign something to the ducks, probably telling them an elaborate story about his day. Her hands moved unconsciously, interpreting his signs even though no one was listening. Mia didn't teach me sign language so I could spend the rest of my life hiding from people who needed it. She taught me so I could help, so I could be a voice for people who society tried to silence. She looked at Hale. I've been so focused on what I lost that I forgot what I still had to give. Hale took her hand, something that had become natural over the past months, their relationship evolving from professional to something deeper, without either of them quite noticing when it happened. For what it's worth, he said, I think Mia would be proud of you. Elena's throat tightened. Yeah, you saved a kid's life, exposed corporate evil, risked everything for people you barely knew. That's pretty heroic. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who knows sign language and couldn't walk away. Sometimes that's the same thing. Noah ran over then, his hands moving excitedly. Elena, the ducks remember me. Look, that one came right up to me. Elena knelt down, signing back. Of course they remember you. You're unforgettable. Will you teach me more signs today? Claire said there are different sign languages in different countries. Is that true? It is. Want to learn some? Noah nodded enthusiastically, then paused. His small hands moved more slowly now, more seriously. Elena, thank you, for coming when Aunt Claire asked you to, for not leaving when it got scary. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but she smiled through them. Thank you for trusting me, for being brave when you had every reason to be afraid. We were brave together, Noah signed. Then, with the perfect logic of an 8-year-old, that's what family does. 1 year later, Elena stood in a courtroom, not as an interpreter this time, but as a witness in her own right. The final Meridian executive was being sentenced. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, read through a list of charges that took 5 minutes to complete. Fraud, conspiracy, kidnapping, attempted murder, violations of informed consent laws. The sentence, 25 years in federal prison. As the executive was led away, she turned and looked directly at Elena. Her expression was pure venom, blame without remorse, anger without accountability. Elena held her gaze until the woman looked away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Elena had learned to navigate them. Brief statement. No additional comments. Thank you for your time. Claire and Noah waited by Hale's car, avoiding the media circus. Noah had grown 3 inches in the past year, his confidence blooming under Claire's careful nurturing and Elena's consistent presence. Is it finally over? Claire signed as Elena approached. It's over. What happens now? Elena looked at the 3 of them, Claire, Noah, Hale. This unlikely family they'd built from tragedy and trauma and stubborn refusal to stay silent. Now we live, Elena signed. Really live, not just survive. That evening, they gathered in Claire and Noah's apartment, a tradition they'd started months ago. Dinner together once a week, no talk of trials or testimony or trauma. Just normalcy, hard-won and precious. Noah was teaching Hale basic sign language, giggling every time the detective fumbled through the alphabet. Claire was cooking, moving through her kitchen with the ease of someone who'd reclaimed her life from people who'd tried to take it. Elena sat at the table, watching them, feeling something she hadn't felt since before the accident. Peace. Her phone buzzed. A text from her therapist, the one she'd finally agreed to see after everything that happened. Proud of you. See you Tuesday. Another text, this one from a deaf advocacy group. We'd like to interview you for our oral history project. Would you be interested? And finally, one from Hale. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being brave enough to answer when someone signed for help. Elena looked up to find Hale watching her from across the room. He smiled, not the cynical, burnt-out expression she'd first met, but something genuine and warm. She smiled back. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and Noah was asleep and Claire had retired to her room with a book, Alina and Hale stood on the apartment's small balcony, looking out over Chicago's lights. "Do you ever wonder," Hale asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't been in that courthouse? If you hadn't known sign language, if you just walked away?" "All the time," Alina admitted. "But then I remember something my sister used to sign to me. The world is full of people who need help. Be someone who helps." Smart kid. She was. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Hale said, "I've been thinking about learning more ASL. Properly, I mean, not just the basics Noah's teaching me." Yeah, seems like something I should have done years ago." Alina turned to look at him directly. "I could teach you, if you want." "I'd like that." And there it was, not a grand declaration or dramatic moment, but something quieter and more real. Two people who'd found each other through darkness, choosing to build something together in the light. Inside the apartment, Noah stirred in his sleep. He dreamed of ducks and signs, and a world where people listened not just with their ears, but with their hearts. He dreamed of his Aunt Claire, strong and safe and home. He dreamed of Alina, who'd kept her promise to come when called. He dreamed of Detective Hale, who'd learned that justice sometimes required learning a language you didn't speak. And he dreamed of himself, no longer the scared boy waiting in a corner for someone to understand him, but a child who knew his voice mattered, even in silence. Especially in silence. Because in the end, this was never a story about being saved. It was a story about having the courage to speak, in whatever language you possessed, even when the world tried to silence you. It was about finding your voice and using it to help others find theirs. And it was about understanding that communication isn't just about sound. It's about seeing, listening, caring enough to bridge the gap between silence and understanding. That's the real witness testimony, the one that can't be silenced or suppressed or forgotten. The testimony of human connection, spoken in signs and whispers, and the quiet courage of people who refuse to look away. This story is dedicated to the deaf and hard-of-hearing community, and to everyone who has ever felt invisible. Your voice matters, even in silence, especially in silence.